Stan Gibilisco here, proprietor and operator of amateur radio station W1GV. Whiskey 1, good vibrations. Although you'll never hear me using phonetics on the air because I operate Morse code, otherwise known as CW, and phase shift keying, otherwise known as BPSK31, binary phase shift keying 31. I think 31 refers to 31 baud, something to do with the speed. But what I'd like to talk about here is an antenna for shortwave listening, and it'll also work for ham radio, by the way. It is a form of random wire antenna called a backward inverted L. Well, that's what I call it. And it's meant for specific types of locations. In particular, suppose that you live kind of on a slope like this. Here's your terrain. Here's your house. Let's just hope that the area is not prone to mudslides, all right? And let's say that this elevation is something reasonable. I mean, it's not like 700 feet or something. Maybe it's on the order of 50 feet, something like that. So you live kind of on the edge of a slope, and you have, instead of living at the base of a hill where things go up, you live at the edge of a slope where things go down. And you have a lot of property. Let's just say you're blessed with that. So you put up a 50-foot tower down here below your dwelling, and then you run your random wire out like this to the top of the tower, and then you ground the tower with a system of radials like that. And this is a metal tower, so you short circuit that connection right up there, so your antenna actually looks like that and is grounded at the far end. Now usually you think of a random wire, it just runs out a certain distance and then it stops. Just free end there. It isn't connected to anything at all. But you can ground the far end of an antenna as long as it is significantly more than a quarter of a wavelength from end to end. Because once you get significantly more than a quarter of a wavelength, you're talking about a random wire that'll behave pretty much the same way. That is to say, randomly, random wire, pretty much the same way whether it's grounded or not at the far end. Now, if you were to disconnect this ground, you'd get a much different impedance at the feed point where your radio is than you would if you ground it. But if you have an antenna tuner here, otherwise known as a transmatch, at the output of your radio, the receiver or transceiver or transmitter, whatever it may be, then you can simply tune out all of the reactance and get the resistive part of the impedance to whatever value will make your radio happy. That is usually 50 ohms, purely resistive impedance. Now, the big advantage of grounding this thing at the far end, there's a really couple of big advantages. Number one, it's going to prevent electrostatic discharges, or pardon me, electrostatic charges from building up on your antenna and presenting all sorts of problems for you in your reception particularly. Number two, it will also tend to direct the electromagnetic pulses that can occur with nearby lightning strikes. It will also tend to direct that away from your radio towards the ground system, rather than subjecting your radio to all of this trouble. So that is the backward inverted L design that I actually have used. You can also use it on an upslope, by the way. Although then it's more like a straightforward, a forward inverted L. I've got to get all that stuff erased. I'm still having a little bit of a learning curve with this Windows Journal. Maybe I should try another program. I believe there's one called OneNote or something that. But I'm with these capacitive tip pens and all that, I'm still having a little bit of a learning curve. Here's your house. Here's your hill. Then you put your tower right here, right next to your house. You run the wire up the tower, connect it to your radio. You make sure, though, that this tower here is not grounded. You don't want it to be grounded, so you'd have to insulate it from the ground. You could also use a wooden mast like a utility pole. Great big creosoted utility pole. I'll bet that'll make your significant other just jump for joy. And then you run the wire out to here, and you have some kind of a ground system with some radials out here like that. It'll pretty much work with the same set of benefits as you would have with the other type of inverted L. The big advantage here is the far end ground. It's really a much safer type of antenna to be using than one that's just floating free and can have electrostatic charge buildup problems, which can endanger you and your property, particularly if you forget to disconnect and ground your antenna when you're not using it, which you should always do, by the way. Stan Gibilisco, W1GV. If you're a ham radio operator, you might occasionally hear me on 14, 18, 21, 24, or 28 megahertz operating CW or PSK, sometimes mobile CW. From big number 8, my venerable Toyota Tundra lifted pickup truck, which I'm going to be happy I have a feeling, because we're going to get about a foot of snow here in the Black Hills of South Dakota, United States of America, saying 73 best regards, and so long.